Good morning. Here are the notes for today's lecture, focusing on the Black Plague. So last week we analyzed some primary sources to try and understand how did people in the 14th century understand the Black Death. Today we're going to focus on what we know now because we learned from what happened to them in the past. We've evolved, we've progressed, we've learned a whole lot more, and this is what we know now. Now, looking at your notes, here are the first two things I want you to answer. Looking at the map below, which shows the Black Plague in Europe during the 1300s, A, according to this map, where did the plague originate? Now, if you're not sure how to read the map, no worries, I'll walk you through it. So a few things I notice on this map. One, I've got Africa, Europe, I've got Asia here. I also notice I've got a bunch of different red lines, two different types actually. I have these large, thicker red lines, and then I have these smaller, thinner red lines. So if I look at the larger red lines, I will notice, especially if I look at the key below, progress of bubonic plague. Okay, there we go. So I can look at these lines and figure out where did it originate or start. I notice that these arrows have one side's the arrow, one side is empty. So if this is where it went to, the empty side is where it came from. So I'll notice that all of these on the left-hand side throughout Europe and a little bit of Africa, they are coming here, but they are coming here from somewhere. So if I trace all of these back, I will notice two of these lines start here. One of them does start down here. So if I look specifically, it looks like this red line is coming from Burma. This red line is coming from the Khanate of the Great Khan. So I can name those two specifically as where did the plague originate, or if I want to go more general, this area is part of Asia. That's how you figure out where exactly the plague originated, based off reading this map. Now I'll also notice those little thin red lines, those are the trade routes at the time. So I need to keep in mind that some of these cross the larger red lines where the plague progressed. And then I have two other dots that represent two other things according to the key. But question number B, because I've answered A now. How do you think that the plague spread so far in such a short time? So take a look at where the arrows are and what could be happening at the time, 1300s, that would cause the plague to start in Asia and move its way west to mostly Europe, although it's covering all of Asia also, and then little bits of Africa. Take a moment to write down your answer for A and B, and then move on to the rest of the PowerPoint. All right, so how did the plague start? The disease can be traced back to Asia, as you saw from the map on the previous slide. Your answer to question number B could have been traders traveled along sea routes through the Black Sea and the Silk Road, which would have been a land trade route, to Asia in order to collect much desired Asian goods to bring back to Europe. Sometimes they brought back plague-infested rats with them. So you probably heard that in the video, fleas on rats, fleas on rats. Those fleas, living on the blood of infected rats, then transfer the disease to people. Therefore, due to trade, port cities around the Mediterranean Sea were first exposed to the disease. And below is a link to the video that you guys watched in the warm-up today. So if you need more time to write down your answers, every word or phrase that's highlighted in red, pause the video, do so, then replay it and continue. All right, so here's a map of the spread of the bubonic plague in Europe. If you look at the key, you'll notice the dark red, or even the darker colors in general, are the earliest cases of the plague. So dark red going out to lighter. So you'll notice here, all the dark starts around Mediterranean Sea, which makes sense. If it was carried by ships, these are where your port cities are going to be. And then it's going to spread out, which is why you see the lighter colors on the outside. Now, the green was where there were only minor outbreaks. So for something about Milan, there was only a minor outbreak. The Pyrenees here, and then up here near Prague and Warsaw. I wonder why there were only minor outbreaks there. Symptoms. So some of the symptoms of the plague included aching limbs, you would vomit blood, your lymph nodes, which you can actually feel if you feel under your jawline. There are small little, like little balls underneath your jaw. Those are your lymph nodes. And when you have the plague, they begin to swell really, really big. I've seen or heard some as large as a chicken egg, some say as large as a baseball. But these are the glands that are found on your neck. They're also in your armpits and your groin area. You also have sores that appear on the body. Eventually, those lymph nodes burst, and your skin appears dark in areas. You have dark spots, maybe even black spots. Black death makes sense. Here are some pictures to show you what I was talking about. Your lymph nodes swelling. Death from the plague was horrible but swift. The Italian writer Boccaccio, who was also mentioned in that video in the warm-up, explained, victims of the plague ate lunch with their friends and ate dinner with their ancestors in paradise. Maybe not literally, but, and here's another picture. This is called gangrene. So this is when the skin begins to die, and it also turns black before falling off, I believe. So the Black Death is known by many days. Like Boccaccio said, you die within the day, lunch with your friends, dinner with your ancestors. Most people did die quite quickly, and by quickly we mean within days. At the time of this pandemic, the Black Death or Black Plague or bubonic plague was also known as the Great Pestilence, which makes sense. We read that when we were analyzing our primary sources, or the Great Plague or the Great Mortality. The term Black Death, which we use a lot today, came into popularity among German and English speakers in the 19th century, so the 1800s, about 500 years after the first breakout of the Black Death. And we continue to refer to it as the Black Death today. Ring around the rosy. You've probably heard the nursery rhyme. Ring around a rosy, pocket full of posies. This one says a tissue, or ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Anyways, the sneezing and falling down in modern English versions of this nursery rhyme have led people to believe that the rhyme dates back to the Great Plague. A rosy rash, they alleged, was a symptom of the plague. Posies of herbs were carried as protection and to ward off the smell of the disease. Think about those lymph nodes bursting. You're not going to smell fantastic, just saying. Sneezing was a final fatal symptom, and all fall down was exactly what happened. The line ashes to ashes in alternative versions of the rhyme is claimed to refer variously to cremation of the bodies, or the burning of victims' homes. Now you can listen to a version here. I'll upload this in Google Classroom. Here's some medieval artwork, or a picture of medieval artwork, that shows the buboes, the spots, and the swelling that occurred when you had the Black Death. Okay, this is interesting. So doctors, this is a doctor, a Black Plague doctor. Doctors thought the plague was spread from bad air, which we remember reading about that in the primary sources last week. They would fill the beaks of the masks with herbs that filtered the bad air smell. Now, even though doctors really had no idea what was causing it, this costume may have actually worked. Why do you think? So they did something right here. They filtered the air. They thought it was the bad air. That part wasn't 100% correct, but the costume did work. It did protect him. Think about it. I'll put this video in underneath this lecture so you can watch this one too and find out more. It's pretty interesting. So how many people died from it? Now this really depends on which historian you talk to, but anywhere between 75 to 200 million people across 3 different continents. Now I know that's a very broad number, but again, this is history. It's hundreds of years ago, and we have to interpret a lot of what we find. So it's a broad estimate. Now, historians have calculated approximately 50% of Europe's population perished because of the Black Death, and approximately 33% of the Middle East population perished. But again, you'll find different numbers depending upon where you look. All you need to know is a lot of people died from this disease. Now, understanding the Black Death. People in the 14th century had little knowledge of how the plague originated, how it spread, or how to treat it. That's why when you guys first started looking at primary sources last week, I had you think about, why don't we have a cure for cancer? Well, just like, and a lot of you answer the way I was kind of getting at, the Black Death back then, they didn't know. Just like you answered with your warm-up about cancer, we don't know. We don't know enough right now on how to cure it, what to do exactly. Some methods are working, some aren't, but we're trying. Same thing with people back then. They didn't fully understand this disease well enough to cure it. They treated it, but they would try things and some things would work, but they didn't fully understand why they worked. They thought they knew, but they didn't know, so on and so forth. So if you look at the picture here, and they mention it in the video you watch for your warm-up, these people are flogging themselves, which is where you take like a whip that has leather, or I think you can use other materials, and you basically whip it on your back, and it cuts your back, and it causes you to bleed terribly. And one of the reasons they did this was, as we talked about last week in your primary source, some people thought God was punishing them. And if they beat themselves and made themselves bleed in this way by flogging, if they were flagellants, then they were seeking penance. So they were punishing themselves to get forgiveness from God. Now, across the world, people struggle to make sense of this pandemic. To give just one example, there you go, flagellation or flagellation, I have to look up how to say that. It's a religious practice of whipping oneself for penance. It grew in popularity during the Black Death. Now, I want you to think about, before you wrap up your notes, how do you think this may have affected the feudal manor system? So remember back to when we did our feudal school and we did the pyramid of power, you have this system where the king's on top, then you have the nobles or the lords, beneath them you have the knights working for them, at the very bottom you have the serfs. Now, a lot of people are dying because of the Black Death, and the Black Death does not discriminate. It doesn't care how rich you are or how poor. So people of all ages, socioeconomic status or wealth, all of these different people, men, women, children, they're dying because of the Black Death. So how is this going to affect that power, that feudal system at the time? What are your thoughts? Once you've taken a moment to think about that, you don't need to write down your answer on your notes. I will probably ask you this, though, as a warm-up question tomorrow. Hint, hint, so be prepared. And below this video, you'll see a bunch of different links to other cool videos that all focus on the Black Death in some way, shape, or form. So feel free to check them out, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Ooh, I almost forgot. Don't forget to write down your homework for today. So 2 things. 1, finish these notes. If you didn't do so in class, access Google Classroom at home to finish. And 2, catch up on any missing assignments. Check your areas, see what's missing not only from my class, but as well as other classes. That way you can start getting caught up this week, or next week is Thanksgiving break. If you have extra free time away from your family, try and get 1 or 2, if not more, assignments in. All right, now have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.